She was so nice and so open-hearted and generous that these monsters took advantage of that.
A brutal killing.
There was blood spattered all over the walls, floor, bed, everywhere.
Identifying her body was one of the most difficult things that I've had to do in my life.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
He was stalking her. He would not leave her alone. He was constantly calling her.
You have another woman involved, maybe seeking revenge.
He was an absolute animal who now, I hope, burns in the hottest part of hell.
The truth will be revealed.
You know, he kind of had a smile on his face, and he called it the perfect murder.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Clinton, Louisiana. A tiny town just north of Baton Rouge. Home to less than 2,000 residents.
Clinton has a reputation for being a very comfortable, very safe, small town.
It's really a quiet parish with a low crime rate.
It has a small downtown, but once you leave the town limits, it's pretty much a rural area.
On the morning of June 26, a woman co-workers called and asked that we go check on her.
The woman is 42-year-old Jora Gillery.
They were just concerned because normally she kept in constant contact with them.
When our first deputy arrived at the house, the side door by the carport was partially opened and had a dog tied up under the steps. Once he made entry into the house, when he walked around the corner, he looked in the room, and that's where he found Miss Gillery, covered with blood and on the floor.
The room was in total disarray. Lamp had been shattered. There were what appeared to be bullet holes in the window. There was blood spattered all over the walls, floor, bed, everywhere. She had a nightshirt or a nightgown that was pushed up. It was a scene of gruesome violence.
The job of finding Jora's killer falls to Sheriff's investigator, Don McKee.
This case was really my first homicide to work, and the scene was really bad. Miss Gillery died from the beating. She had also been shot several times, and she had also been stabbed several times. You just have to do your job and try to put it to the side.
His first task is to notify Jora's family.
Disbelief was my reaction when I heard. When we arrived, we had to face the crime scene. Her father and brother remained outside of the home. I went in and ultimately had to identify the body for the family. was one of the most difficult things that I've had to do in my life. If you walk into a room, you see someone and you can recognize them within a millisecond. I had to spend about 3 minutes, 4 minutes comparing things like her lips and the finger structure. And by taking little bits and pieces like that, only then could I make a definite identification. Jora was a very intelligent, very attractive woman, very, very full of life. She was an administrator for a major insurance company. She worked very hard, enjoyed living in the country, and she remained true to those country roots all of her life.
You never heard anything bad about Miss Jora. What we learned is she would help anyone that needed help and do whatever she could for people, and she was just a caring person.
She just couldn't say no to human or animal. I think Jora just couldn't pass up an animal that needed help. That's why she ended up with, 20 or 25 dogs and a giant kennel on her property. That's why she ended up with, horses.
Many of her animals were strays, particularly the dogs and cats. She purchased the horses, enjoyed riding and enjoyed being just around those horses.
In order to find the killer, Detective McKee begins the difficult task of reconstructing the last 24 hours of Jora Gillery's life.
When you're building timelines, you have a very open mind. A timeline can be filled in by almost any kind of information. You don't know how far back you have to go until you find somebody to fill the puzzle in.
The only timeline we had was when she left work early that Friday to come home. Her co-worker advised us that she did leave early that Friday. It was shortly after noon. The autopsy shows that the homicide could have happened anywhere from noon on Saturday to noon on Sunday.
With a wide window of time for her murder, Detective McKee looks to the scene for clues that may lead him to the killer.
There's blood by the drawer where the knives were. There's blood on the counter. I think at one time she tried to get a knife or something to defend herself with. The pattern from the side door showed spots of blood to where she ran towards the front door. There was keys in the front door. It was a deadbolt lock. There was blood on them keys that indicated she was trying to get out of that door, that she was trying to run away. Her phone was knocked off the hook. There was blood on the wall there.
Despite the violence, there is no physical or forensic evidence pointing to a potential suspect.
There was a gun involved, there was a knife, and some type of blunt object. And none of those were found on the scene, so the perpetrator took them away with them. The fact that no murder weapons were left on the scene means that the perpetrator at least had the presence of mind to try and cover their tracks.
There was no forced entry, so she had to open the door. The dog was tied up, and we learned real quick that that would have never happened with Miss Gillery.
It appeared that someone had secured that dog while they made entry into the house.
The indications that we got was basically that she was killed by someone she knew.
Police begin to canvass the area to see if anyone saw or heard anything during the window in which Jora was killed.
Miss Gillery had very few neighbors right in the area, and the closest neighbor was across the street from her, and that turned out to be the Skippers.
Amy and Philip Skipper live with their newborn and a young man they had taken in.
Philip Skipper was the guardian or sort of de facto stepfather to a teenage boy named John Ballio. The Skippers and John Ballio were very cooperative. Philip Skipper said that he and John Ballio had been helping a neighbor move on Saturday and didn't arrive home until late that night. Philip said that he, his wife, and child were at the Skipper's trailer across the street after that, and they didn't hear anything.
Amy was emotionally destroyed, talking about how well Miss Gillery had treated them and how much Miss Jora had done for them and helped them out.
The relationship between Jora Gillery and the Skippers was close. They saw each other all the time, and Jora did whatever she could to help them out because they were poor. They initially lived in this really dilapidated trailer. She helped them get a newer one. She sometimes bought things for them, especially for their baby, diapers, some baby food, formula. She even decided to go ahead and name her good friends across the street as the beneficiaries of a life insurance policy.
They would also, in return, do things for Miss Gillery that when she would have to go out of town for her job, they would take care of the animals.
She gave them money. They cleaned her house. They were in constant communication all the time.
During their interview with the Skippers, they never could come up with anybody to lead us to anybody that would do anything to Miss Jora. They advised that she very seldom had company, so they was unable to give us any names or anywhere to look for a suspect.
Despite their willingness to talk, something seems off.
Philip Skipper was just overwhelmingly trying to assist the family. He talked good about Miss Jora, but then he would constantly go to, I'll clean it up, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll take care of the dogs, I'll take care of the animals. I've never seen somebody that was willing to help as much as Philip was. I felt that they knew something.
Detective McKee observes something that needs explaining.
We'd noticed some scratches on his arm. He said that him and his stepson were wrestling in the yard. And John did have scratches on his arms also, and his story was the same as Philip's story, which was really suspicious to me.
So they need to look at the neighbors and see if they're actually involved in it.
Bloody scratches on the arms of two of Jora Gillery's neighbors has police questioning if they were involved in her murder.
In a case like this, in which the victim struggles with the assailant, it would not be unusual that there be some blood from the victim scratching the assailant.
When pressed for an explanation, Philip makes an unusual admission.
He said that Miss Gillery had argued with the Skippers due to the fact that a dog had killed one of the Skippers' goats. And they was blaming it on Miss Jora's dog. And Miss Jora was sure it was not her dog. She had told the Skippers that they was no longer welcome to come to her house, that she would stay to herself, they needed to stay to themselves.
The argument took place just 1 month prior to her death.
Tension between neighbors, that's always kind of a red flag that goes up. But you need something in a murder, you know. Why would you do it? You need a motive, an opportunity. They had an opportunity, they were right across the street. They had a semi-motive that was a tension. But it's kind of like cutting the arm that feeds you. You know, she was helping them a lot. You know, why murder her?
They ask both Philip and his stepson, John, to take a polygraph.
In some cases, when you're investigating murders, you will use a polygraph as an investigative aid. It is to send messages to the person. You don't believe them. Why would you ask them to take a polygraph otherwise?
My advice to anybody who's asked to take a polygraph is say, sure, I'll take it. If you're an innocent person, the police are going to say, well, you're no longer a suspect, so take the polygraph.
Both Philip and John Ballio had no problem with taking a polygraph. The questions related to the case were, did you kill Miss Jora Gillery? Did you stab or shoot Jora? Can you take us to the gun that was used to kill Miss Jora? Both Philip and John Ballio passed. Once they passed, we had no other evidence to pin them to the murder.
Detectives need to find who Jora might have been in contact with in her last 24 hours. Her co-workers provide the name of a recent boyfriend, Tommy Alexander.
Basically, they met through horses. Jora owned horses, Tommy Alexander owned horses. They met at the feed store in the nearby town. They started dating. They dated a little while. Then that ended when Jora found out that Tommy Alexander had another girlfriend. That opens up all kind of possibilities. I mean, you have another woman involved. Maybe Tommy would be mad about something. Maybe the other woman would be seeking revenge.
It's a crime of passion. People act without thinking. If you can show me a love triangle, I'll tell you have a potential homicide on your hands.
They bring Tommy Alexander in.
Tommy, when talking to him, he was calm. He was saddened by Miss Jora's death. He was saying how good of a person she was, just like everybody else we had talked to had said.
They question him about his most recent interaction with Jora.
Tommy Alexander told the detectives that he had spoken to Jora on Wednesday. They had seen each other. One was transferring horses to another. There were some papers to sign. So that was the last time he spoke to her, was on Friday.
Police must confirm his whereabouts during the time in which Jora was killed.
He had an alibi. He said he had been home all weekend with his girlfriend, which turned out to be true. She backed him up on that story. They were able to eliminate him in the investigation as a possible suspect.
He was really upset. Nothing to raise an eyebrow to think that he was involved in the homicide. Based on his story and the lack of evidence we had, we really had to start looking other places.
So it was going back, did she have anything out of the ordinary happening in her life?
Looking for answers, they turned to Jora's phone records.
We had a phone call that would have matched the last day that Miss Jora was alive. We traced it, we tracked it. It was associated with someone named Steve Williams.
The call was placed at 8:27 a.m. that Saturday, potentially making Williams the last person to speak to Jora alive.
Steve Williams was a Baton Rouge police officer. He pestered her at work to the point where she eventually agreed to go on a date with him. When she got back, she told her coworkers that she never wanted to see him again. She said he was too free with his hands. He kept grabbing her and touching her, and she didn't really want to see him anymore. At the time all this was going on, Steve Williams was actually married. He and his wife had a child, but apparently that didn't stop his romantic pursuits in other areas.
Janora's friends say he was relentless.
We were told that Steve Williams basically was stalking her, was real aggressive towards Miss Janora. Steve had been coming to her work in Baton Rouge and had actually made everybody in the building feel uncomfortable about the way he would show up to meet Janora when she would get off from work, show up at lunchtime. He was really aggressive towards Janora, trying to get her into a relationship with him.
The thing about stalking is there is an obsession, and he's demonstrating that with multiple phone calls, showing up just unexpectedly. So if he's obsessed with her, he may not be satisfied with the level of attention that he's getting from her, and he may progress that to aggression.
That was a huge red flag for the investigators. I mean, when you have a domestic situation like that, it really puts them on high alert. So they really began to focus on Steve Williams. You know, you have a sort of a jilted boyfriend who keeps bothering her, who keeps wanting to come by and see her. And all of a sudden, he's going to come by whether she wants it or not, and then she's never seen again.
Baton Rouge police officer Steve Williams, who once dated homicide victim Janora Gillery, is now the lead suspect in her murder.
Police officers don't like investigating other police officers. It's something you want to shy away from. You know, they don't like to think that another cop would be involved in some kind of criminal activity. But cops generally have a very intimate knowledge of, you know, law enforcement and how crimes are committed. So a police officer can be a more wary suspect, because you would presume that he or she knows what not to do, what evidence to make sure it doesn't get left. So they make sort of dangerous criminals. They're so knowledgeable about the investigative process itself.
His potential involvement comes down to the call he made to her the day she died.
When the detectives questioned Steve Williams, you know, of course, he denied having anything to do with Janora's death. He said that they were friends, and he resented the fact that he was characterized as sort of a stalker. He said that he did call her a few times a week, but, you know, just do some friendly chit-chatting.
They narrow in on the one call they're interested in.
Steve admitted to calling her Saturday.
He said that although he did call her, he was going to come by Saturday, he never made it. So the detectives were sort of left with, you know, is this guy telling the truth? He very well may have been the last person, you know, to see her alive. I mean, he could be the killer.
Police learn of another call between Steve and Janora, witnessed by her colleagues.
So the Friday before Janora was killed, Steve Williams called her work. Her co-workers said they engaged in an argument on the telephone, and then she left work. So, you know, whether that argument played into her leaving work early or it was strictly just to go do some chores around her house, you know, nobody really knows. But there was a verbal altercation on the phone, and then later Steve Williams says that he was going to come by. So, you know, from the investigator's standpoint, you know, this is looking more and more like he's the #1 suspect in her murder.
They interview his co-workers and discover a disturbing trend.
Steve Williams had a reputation, a history of this sort of overly aggressive pursuit of whatever love interest he had. In the Baton Rouge Police Academy, there was a female recruit who made the complaint against him.
We interviewed his co-worker, and she was able to give us some information about how Steve Williams acted towards her.
She said he kept harassing her, would call her at home, off duty, about academy class type business, but she was in a relationship with somebody and she didn't want him making these late night calls.
Based on the information we got about Steve Williams going after her, it was basically the same way that he went after Miss Jora. So it showed a pattern of aggressiveness and jealousy.
We look at the past to look to the future. People are creatures of habit. So it's an indicator. It's patterns of behavior and tells. In and of itself is not evidence, but as a trained investigator, you're looking for that because that will lead you to ask certain questions.
So he had a reputation for this kind of behavior. And of course the police have to look at this and say, well, this time they could go even a step further. Did he kill her?
Believing Steve Williams had both motive and opportunity, they bring him in again, this time for a polygraph.
Anytime you investigate a police officer, you got to be careful because you don't know their state of mind. You're telling this man that his career as a police officer is about to come to an end because he's suspected in a murder. He didn't do good on the polygraph.
His results indicated that he was lying about one or more things in his answers.
And that's when he advised that he was not going to talk to us anymore without a lawyer. So we obtained a search warrant and went to his residence. We actually seized his police car and had it towed to the crime lab for processing. What we was hoping to find was a murder weapon or some bloody clothes or any other type of evidence that might help us in the investigation. Unfortunately, we came up with no weapon that would have matched what we was looking for.
A drop of Jora Gillery's blood in Steve Williams's car or house would have convicted him. I mean, there's really no other excuse for that.
I really thought that Steve Williams was the man I was after. Just did not have enough to do anything with.
All you have is odd circumstances, him making a phone call, leaving a message, him sort of harassing her at work, but you know, none of that's a crime and they couldn't charge him.
That's really when the case came to a complete stop. We just had nowhere else we could follow up to.
Not every homicide case can be solved or will be solved. We have to be realistic. You do as much as you can to the best of your ability. You will get frustrated.
In this case, they talked to the co-workers, they talked to the neighbors, they talked to everybody that they could find, but they didn't have any physical evidence or a real motive.
I was getting aggravated because I wanted to solve it, and I done told Mr. Gillery that we was gonna solve it. And there's nothing I could tell the family, except for we're working on it. We're waiting for a break.
Jora's death took a tremendous toll on her family. Illnesses, divorce, directly resulted from this murder. But this matter never went cold for Investigator Mackey. We trusted Mr. Mackey tremendously. We knew that Mackie was doing a great job.
Over a year after Janora's death, police receive a call that sets the investigation back into motion.
The detectives got a tip from another jurisdiction. They went over to interview this alleged witness, a guy named Donnie Fisher.
Initially, what indicated to the police officers that Donnie Fisher may know something about a homicide in East Feliciana Parish.
He had given some details of the murder. I knew exactly what murder he was talking about. When interviewing Donnie, he at first didn't want to cooperate. What I done was I laid pictures of the crime scene and got on to him and said, this woman did not deserve this. She was a good woman. After I showed him that, he told us what was told to him.
He was friends with Philip Skipper and John Ballio.
Fisher says Janora's neighbors took him to her house after the murder.
Donnie Fisher told us then Miss Janora's family paid them to clean up the house.
Philip Skipper told me, what would I think if I killed Gillery? And I kind of took it as a joke at first.
And what did he tell you?
You know, he kind of had a smile on his face, and you know, I knew. He didn't have to just come out and say it. I knew in my mind. He called it the perfect murder.
And then he said that John Ballio had taken him into the house and told him step by step how they killed Miss G. When he was taken to the house, what was he saying?
He was saying where the blood was. He was telling me everything.
If Fisher is telling the truth, this means Skipper and Ballio lied about where they were the night she died.
Fisher started giving details of the murder that he would not have knowledge of.
And one of them held the dog back, knocked on the door, hit her with a baseball bat, knocked the teeth out, cut her up, shot her in the head.
Donnie Fisher implicated Philip Skipper, Johnny Hoyt, Lisa Hoyt, and John Ballio.
This information adds 2 new names to the investigation: Philip's sister, Lisa Hoyt, and her husband, Johnny.
That's the first time we heard of Johnny Hoyt's name was when we interviewed Donnie Fisher.
Johnny Hoyt was kind of a stocky guy. He was kind of a bigger built, muscular type guy.
So you have this little tight group of people here, and the statement from Donnie Fisher implicated them all in the murder.
Donnie continues, telling police of Philip's admissions.
Did he say who cut?
He didn't say, he just said we.
Did he say who shot?
He just said we. It was a gang. It's not, they're like one people, okay? He said it's a thrill. That's what he told me. It was a thrill. He says it's the best feeling he'll ever have.
The story that he told, it was no doubt in my mind that we was going after the right people this time.
But without any physical evidence, they need to find another way to prove beyond a doubt that the 4 people Fisher has named are responsible for the murder.
If you play on what feelings of remorse they might have, you want to get them to confess. And they don't have to confess, of course. They can just ask for a lawyer and the whole thing's over.
Brought into custody, Philip Skipper, Lisa Hoyt, and Johnny Hoyt all refused to cooperate.
John Ballio was the last person that we was able to talk to. It was a long interview. It was a couple hours probably. And finally he just broke.
Philip and Lisa, me and Johnny, we was going over there to see Miss G. They wanted me to watch them kill Miss G and hold the dog.
Did they say why they wanted you to watch?
It would be my true test of brotherhood.
A year after the murder of Jora Gillery, police have damning testimony from a 15-year-old who was witness to the crime.
John Ballio basically told us it was part of my initiation to get into the brotherhood, was to go and participate and watch them kill Miss G. The brotherhood was a white supremacist group. It was a hate group, is what it was.
And the initials for the Brotherhood was GFBD. God forgives, the Brotherhood doesn't. And, you know, as with all gangs, they're created to intimidate, to scare people.
All right, what happens? When we got there, Lisa walked up to the door and knocked on it and told Miss G that she needed some money to get the baby some diapers. And when she did that, Johnny punched Miss G. The first time she got stabbed, Lisa stabbed her. And then Johnny stabbed her, and Philip. They all took turns.
When did they shoot her? Before they stabbed her or after they stabbed her?
Before they stabbed her, they was making me watch, saying that it would show if I was a true brother or not, or whether or not I could keep my mouth shut.
Ballio explains this wasn't the only motivation.
He said Miss Gillery had a life insurance policy that was signed over to Philip Skipper and Amy Skipper.
The growing fight over the goat and the dog incident made Philip Skipper realize she's going to change the beneficiary on that policy or just outright cancel it, and we need to get over there and kill her so that we benefit from that policy. Two people who live in a trailer out in the middle of the woods, $25,000 was pretty significant. I think race and money played kind of equal parts. If Jora Gillery had been a white woman, I doubt they would have killed her.
I think John finally broke because he did feel bad about what happened. I think he realized what he had done was wrong.
I thought it was pretty sick myself. I was crying, but I was also just trying to shut up so they wouldn't get worried about me telling them. Because they said if I ever said anything, they'd kill me.
Armed with Ballio's confession and a complete understanding of the timeline, detectives now have enough to press charges against the 4 conspirators.
Miss Gillery left work that Friday to come home. Saturday, Philip Skipper, Lisa, and Johnny Hoyt, they had been popping pills, drinking all day long.
They determined that they wanted to go over there and initiate John Ballio into the Brotherhood.
Midnight, 1 o'clock, they all go over there. Lisa knocked on the door. When Miss Gillery came to the door, Johnny Hoyt punched her. They chased her in the bedroom. That's when they took turns shooting her, stabbing her, and then beating her with the bat. After they killed her, they went back to their house. They burned their clothes and shoes. Gun used, they said they threw it off in the river.
The district attorney charges all 4 suspects with murder.
Lisa Hoyt pled guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 25 years in prison.
Philip Skipper went to trial, was found guilty. Second-degree murder, he got life in prison. Johnny Hoyt also went to trial and was found guilty and is serving life in prison.
John Ballio cooperated. He was a juvenile when this occurred, and he pled guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to juvenile life.
Jora was so nice and so open-hearted and generous that these monsters took advantage of that.
It is a dumb dog that bites the hand that feeds it. And Philip Skipper was a dumb dog, a swine, an absolute animal, who now, I hope, burns in the hottest part of hell.
I feel a lot better now in this case that we've done our best. The DA done his job, and we got justice for the family. And I feel that the family's happy, so if they're happy, I'm happy.
We work for their families. I just want to make them sleep better at night. You know, they need to put this behind them.
And I would not want us to forget the life, the lively, happy, smiling, beautiful person that Jora was.